At the time, Esther got some links and left the country, went to Dubai. Then again, someone reaches out to me, like, hi, how you doing? Give me your WhatsApp number. So I give them my WhatsApp number. It's someone from Dubai. They're like, oh, by the way, I've been hosting Esther and the husband here, and the drama I have had to go through. Her email was hacked, her credit card, do what happened to it, like some weird things were just happening. So eventually, by the time she was reaching out to me, they'd left her house. So now she's reaching out to tell me, yo, that was a roller coaster ride hosting those people, and this is what happened.
According to Grace, the person was an old friend of Esther's who reached out after seeing the stories published about Esther back home.
The person who reached out to me because she saw the stories I'd written about Esther Runga and the Finger of God and Quincy Timberlake. And I think at the time she told me she knew Esther either because they went to school together but they were friends, they were old friends, they knew each other from way back. So Esther reached out to her and asked her, do you mind hosting us for a bit? You know, the government is doing this to us or that to us. We have nothing. We need to get away from Kenya. Could you host us? And she was like, yeah, sure, come. So she went with her kids and Quincy.
But first, let's go back to how she got to Dubai in the first place. I came across this article by Gafla that reveals how Esther and her Dubai friend came into contact. It all started with a comment left by the friend on one of Esther's Facebook posts where she praised Esther for having a beautiful family. Esther didn't take the comment too well, as she thought her friend was trying to mock her, considering the controversies surrounding her in the media. Turns out her friend wasn't even aware of what was going on. This softened Esther a bit, and she asked for her number, called her, and asked for help to relocate. Nancy organized passports, visas, and plane tickets for Esther and her family, and they managed to move to Dubai, where the friend, together with her husband, hosted them from January to March 2012. At this point, Esther was expectant with her second child. Things seemed to be going well for the Timberlakes and their hosts until Nancy started noticing that something wasn't right.
They were there. This lady saw a lot of red flags in Timberlake, and she kind of tried to tell Esther about it. And when it got back to Quincy, I think that's when things just went haywire with both her relationship with Esther, and that's when also Esther left. And before Esther left, the lady told me that she noticed this guy was trying to hack her email and stuff like that, but he didn't manage to. So that's why she reached out to me. She was like, well, I hosted these guys and this is what happened to me.
Attempting to hack his wife's email wasn't the only weird thing Quincy did. According to an article by Gafla, 2 weeks after their arrival in Dubai, Quincy accused their hosts of exposing their situation to the Kenyan press. This was after an article on the Star's newspaper's website revealed that they were in Dubai. On investigating, Nancy found out that before the Star, the news was broken by a publication known as Sydney News. In the original article, Nancy's workplace and details on how she contacted the media with the story was published. That is when it dawned on Nancy that Quincy wrote the article on Sydney News to put a wedge between Esther and her. Gafla also reports that Quincy was unwilling to contribute to expenses around the house. He would claim he was broke whenever he was asked for money, yet he flossed his money to outsiders. The couple later left Nancy's home after her husband said he couldn't house them unless they renewed their visitor visa. Despite being away from their home country, Kenya, Quincy and Esther hadn't abandoned their political dreams. The couple was determined to keep their political ambitions alive, even if it meant fabricating their lives. In late July 2012, Esther sent messages to Kenyan diaspora media claiming that she was in Dallas, Texas, on a promotional tour called Betting on Kenya, US Bus Tour. The tour was meant to raise awareness for her campaign for political office in Kenya. But one diaspora media platform, Jumbo Sport News, saw through the facade. According to an article by the news site, Esther messaged them on Facebook that she was in Dallas for an online radio interview with a Kenyan diaspora media platform. Jumbo Sport News went ahead and asked her if she could grant them an on-camera interview, to which she agreed, but only after the story about her radio interview was published. She then asked whether she could send over a press release and stated that her personal assistant would be the one to send the press release. However, after some time, Esther sent the press release herself. The document was from a Nicole Barford, who was her personal assistant. Jumbo Sport News later discovered that the PA did not exist, and the name was derived from a Nicole Hamilton, who worked for a PR and communication agency in Australia. The contents of the press release were also very strange. The heading of the press release was Esther Timberlake arrives in Dallas, Texas, for betting on Kenya tour, which sounded similar to Obama's Betting on America bus tour. A fact check by Jumbo Sport News actually revealed that the entire press release was lifted from an AFP article from 2012 titled Obama Wraps China Romney in Debut Campaign Bus Tour. So if you're confused, in 2012, President Obama was running for a second term. So yeah, she may have lifted a lot of the material from the press release from Obama's staff. A paragraph in the article read, and I quote, "Just this morning, my administration took a new action to hold China accountable for unfair trade practices that harm American automakers," Obama told a sun-baked crowd seated before a bun draped in an American flag. Ohio is a perennial battleground in presidential elections. No Republican has ever won the White House without capturing it, and Romney's road to power looks unlikely if he does not win it on November 6th. End of quote. A paragraph in Esther Arunga's press release read, and I quote, "Just this morning, my administration took new action to hold current MPs accountable for unfair CDF practices that harm young Kenyans with genuine business intentions," Esther told a sun-baked crowd seated before a bun draped in the Kenyan flag. She told the crowd that Rift Valley is a perennial battleground in presidential elections. No single individual has ever won the state house without capturing it, and Raila's road to power looks unlikely if he does not win it in 2013. End of quote. The other line from her release was, and I quote, urging her followers to stay positive and interested, she was regularly interrupted by laughter, applause, and shouts of "I love you" and "5 years" from the enthusiastic crowd in downtown Dallas. She's expected to arrive in Cleveland, Ohio, in her own style of campaigning dubbed House Party Get-Together System. End of quote. The copied and altered line from the same Obama tour read, and I quote, "In a speech delivered in sweltering heat but regularly interrupted by laughter, applause and shouts of 'I love you' and 4 more years." End of quote. I hope you got that. If you didn't, feel free to rewind and then you'll see where the plagiarism took place. Esther was asked by the news platform to send photos from the campaign event. Her response? Many photos were taken, but she didn't know who had them. They also asked her about the interview she had agreed to do, but she said she couldn't do it because she had to prepare for the radio interview in Dallas. This turned out to be a lie, as the show's host clarified that Arunga would not be in Dallas physically and that the interview would be done through Skype. Esther and Quincy also claimed to be living in Australia, but Jumbo News Sport revealed that it was all a lie after they discovered comments left under their article about the couple came from the same IP address in Dubai, appearing under different names. One of the comments was even posted from a fake Twitter account purported to be for the UK's Daily Telegraph, which only seemed to be reporting news about Esther. After Jumbo News Sport ran a story revealing how the couple were living a lie, they received hate mail and threats from the two. Esther and Quincy's Australian dream finally came true after they sought political asylum and relocated to the country with their son Sinclair. Esther and the kids settled in Kalangur, northern Brisbane. By this time, the couple had 3 children, Sinclair and 2 daughters aged 2.5 and 6 months. Quincy joined them later after convincing the Australian authorities that he was a political refugee in need of asylum. Having lived and studied in Australia for 7 years while pursuing her law degree, it wasn't too difficult for Esther to get a resident visa. She also got a job as a lawyer in the New South Wales Supreme Court, but she had to stop working when she got pregnant with the 3rd child. Even then, they managed to keep things afloat because of Australia's stable social security systems. Must be nice to be in a country with working systems. Can't say the same for this place. But anyway, life seemed to be going well for the Timberlakes. That was until tragedy struck on June 18th, 2014, when their firstborn son, Sinclair, died under unclear circumstances. He was only 3 years old. Esther and Quincy told the police that he fell down the stairs while playing with his sister. According to police reports, however, Sinclair had significant injuries to his body. Police said the boy had internal injuries, a large burn mark on his head, and severe bruising to his arms and torso. Both parents initially told police that the burn mark was from an iron that fell on him after he pulled it off a bench a few days before his death. They also said the scars were the result of torture committed by other people when they lived in Kenya and Dubai. But the police were quick to dispute this, with photographs of Sinclair arriving in Australia and medical evidence showing that he did not have the injuries before arriving in the country. Fast forward to 2019, and 2 of Esther's friends testified that they noticed the cuts on Sinclair's body way back in 2012. One of the friends, Christina Carroll, said she visited Esther in 2012 and noticed Sinclair had cut marks on his forehead and cheeks. According to Carroll, they were straight-line cuts. There were about 3 across his forehead and some on his cheeks. She also said it looked like they had been there a couple of weeks and had healed. To Carol, it looked like Sinclair had been cut with a razor or knife. When Carol asked Esther about the scars, she said Sinclair had fallen down the stairs. On the same day, Miss Carroll said Esther had spoken to her about zombies invading the world and eating people. According to Carol, Esther said Quincy told her that the zombie stuff was real. Another friend said that in 2012, she noticed distinct cuts on Sinclair's back when she visited the Timberlakes' home. Whatever it was clear that Sinclair's pain was inflicted. The question was, who was responsible and why? After the incident, the Timberlakes moved out of their home and the daughters were placed in foster care. The couple was still together but under separate roofs. A few weeks later, Esther sent a very long apology letter to her parents, seeking forgiveness from them after their estranged relationship. In the letter, Esther revealed that the decision to sue her parents wasn't her idea, but the attorney company she had hired to press the legal charges against Dr. Njenga, who insisted that everyone involved in her abuse be charged. If you want to understand more about what I'm talking about, go listen to part 2 of this series, where I break down the entire thing that happened with Esther and a psychiatrist known as Dr. Njenga. Esther later expressed her concerns about Quincy's mental state to the police. She claimed her husband was mentally ill. According to Esther's lawyer, she persuaded Quincy to seek medical help, and on July 3rd, Mr. Timberlake admitted himself to the Prince Charles Mental Health Hospital.
He went to the hospital at the behest of Esther. Esther persuaded him that he needed to go to the hospital because he was mentally ill. He was seeing demons. He was seeing things that are commonplace with schizophrenia.
Esther then went back to investigators to change her story. According to her police statement, Esther told detectives she heard Sinclair crying out for her at about 11:30 p.m. on June 17th. She claimed Mr. Timberlake took the boy up to his bedroom because the toddler had fallen down the stairs. Esther had a scream from the room and tried to rush in. The door was shut, but she managed to open it and claimed to have seen Quincy punch the boy in the stomach. Esther told officers her husband was pushing on the boy's stomach repeatedly because he believed he had been possessed by aliens and demons. She claimed he told her he was pumping poison out of the boy. Police documents say that Esther stated Quincy was speaking as if he was attempting to save Sinclair from alien embryos implanted in his stomach. According to Esther's statement, her husband shouted, come out, you bloodsuckers. Tell Bill Gates no more scientific tests on our own, as he did with the Guatemalans." Okay, that's a bit strange. Esther said she picked Sinclair up, but Quincy snatched him from her arms and threw him against a wall. The boy was still alive, but was weak and could barely stand. Sinclair was showered and put to bed before Esther dialed emergency services at 1:44 a.m. Unfortunately, the paramedics were unable to resuscitate Sinclair. Remember the injuries on his body? Well, Esther later told the police that they could have been caused by a healing technique called coining, which her husband used to try to get rid of evil spirits that cause nightmares and disease. So you might be wondering, just what the hell is coining? Well, coining, also known as gua sha, I hope I pronounced that well, is a traditional technique used to treat illnesses since ancient times that is widely practiced in China and other Southeast Asian countries such as Indonesia and Vietnam. The intention of coining is to rid the body of so-called negative energies. Wow, this is a lot. This is a lot. It's weird. It's strange. Yeah, this was a lot. Due to this new piece of information, Quincy was arrested and charged with his son's murder. Esther, who had changed her name to Chrysalette Providence Timberlake, probably to, disassociate from the past and what had happened, who knows, was also arrested but soon granted bail. She faced charges of being an accessory after the fact of murder. Now, what this means is that she wasn't charged on the basis of having anything to do with the murder. Instead, she was charged for failing to express what she knew to the police. As part of her bail conditions, Esther was banned from contacting her husband and from being within 500 meters of an international airport. Her passport was confiscated and she was required to report to police twice a week. 5 years later, after a series of trials and hearings, Esther would plead guilty to charges of being an accessory to the murder of her 3-year-old son. She admitted to lying to the police to try and help her husband avoid punishment. She also confessed to the court that she lied because she was scared that Quincy would hurt her because of his physique. She was handed a 10-month prison term, but immediately freed on parole a few days after pleading guilty. In his ruling, the Australian judge was quoted by the Australian Associated Press as saying that he was sympathetic to her situation because of the amount of loss she had suffered from Sinclair to her husband and her daughters. Fast forward to September 2023, and Quincy would be sentenced to 11 years after pleading guilty to charges of manslaughter in the tragic loss of his son. Initially, he was supposed to get a maximum of 25 years in prison for manslaughter according to Australian law, but he entered into a plea agreement with the prosecution for a lesser sentence. He was also revealed to have been diagnosed with psychosis and schizophrenia. At this point, Quincy had spent almost 10 years in prison since being arrested 3 months after the tragedy happened. He was declared eligible for parole, but only after serving another 9 years in prison. The case was finally closed. So, we know that Quincy is currently serving his sentence in prison, but what about Helen and Esther? What are they doing with their lives? Well, Esther was able to finally be reunited with her 2 daughters in 2019, who had been in foster care since the case began. Little is known about what she does, and it was reported that in 2016, she worked as a storekeeper in Australia. As for Helen, let's just say that he's still thriving despite the controversy he previously faced. He's still out here getting his gigs, and he's actually been interviewed quite a number of times since this whole thing happened. You might also be surprised to know that The Finger of God Church is still operational, but under a different name. In March 2019, the church changed its name to Kingdom Embassy International. He is in partnership with an American preacher who runs other churches globally. So, we're done with all that, but I just want to give my final thoughts on the whole situation and what I think caused Esther to spiral and find herself in this really unfortunate situation. So, when I first started this series, I had mentioned that she was raised as a Seventh-day Adventist, or SDA as it's commonly known. And I think this upbringing might have to do a lot with what she faced. Because if you've interacted with the SDA faith, and this is not to shade them in any way, but just from what I have seen and how it is being brought up in a very religious upbringing, especially when it comes to denominations like SDA and Christianity, is they're very strict with how they conduct themselves and how they live life. And this trickles down even into their children. Their children can be quite sheltered from the world. And this sheltering really prevents kids from learning about life and just how to go about life, how to conduct yourself and how to carry yourself in the world, how to interact with other people even. When you're sheltered, when you're not exposed, it's very easy for you to you're in a very vulnerable position. And it's very easy for you to be preyed upon by predatory people. Especially if you're a woman, it's very easy for you to be preyed upon if you were raised in a sheltered environment. Now, I don't know her. I don't know her personal life, but this is just speculation based and analysis based on information that I know and information that's already out there, information that's known about people who are raised as SDA. Their upbringing is very, very strict, very, very sheltered. You're not allowed to do a number of things. The way you move and interact with people in this world is not the way other people do. And so you end up missing out on a lot of experiences that help shape you. And I feel like this kind of played into why she turned out the way she did. When you're not exposed as a woman to dealing with guys, it's very easy to become a target to guys. It's very easy to be preyed upon by men if you've been raised sheltered as a woman. And she left her job and just got immersed into another church. So basically, religion is kind of like all she knew, because she left KTN, then started immersing herself with Helen's church, and she became so dedicated. She went in too deep into it. And yeah, it really doesn't help. I'm not saying you shouldn't practice a certain faith, but I believe in balance. I believe you should always balance, because at the end of the day, you're still a human being and you're still going to interact with people in the world, people who don't have the same upbringing and faith as you. And it's very, very important that you're equipped with the tools to do that. And being sheltered does not equip you with the tools to do that, to interact with people who are different from you, people with a different mindset, with a different outlook, with a different upbringing. And I feel like that's how she was easily sort of manipulated into this relationship that she had with Quincy. Maybe had she experienced more, had she not been sheltered so much in her upbringing, she'd have the tools to tell that this guy is not the right person for her and is not going to take her anywhere. But yeah, it's really unfortunate that what happened. And it's unfortunate because she was one of the biggest media personalities we had at the time. I mean, I grew up watching her. I grew up looking up to her. I thought I was going to be like her as a kid, but unfortunately, her life ended up the way it ended up. But good for her for reuniting with her daughters. Though it's not under the best circumstances, but I'm sure it was difficult to start over, because when those kids were separated from her, they were really young. one of them was an infant, 6 months. Like, they're really, really young when this thing happened. And just starting over, I can't even imagine being separated from an infant who you need to breastfeed and all that. It sucks. And if you're a parent and you're listening to this, please don't shelter your kids, especially your daughters, because we live in a world where women are targeted every day from the time they come into this world. Please do not shelter your daughters. Please equip them with the tools they need to move into this world. And if you feel like you can't do that, get someone who can. I can't believe this has turned into a whole parenting thing. I myself am not a parent, but anyways, I'm coming with the information of being a former child. Yeah, don't shelter your children, man. Don't. Please don't. You'll be doing them a disservice. As for Helen, I don't know. I don't know. You know, at the end of the day, there's the truth and there's what we, the public, know. So we might never even know what really happened between these three. We just know what was told to us. But yeah, I really, really enjoyed doing this series, and I hope you enjoyed listening to it as well. So with that being said, thank you so much for listening. Remember to like and share this episode, follow the Raw Pod on all our socials, and don't forget to let me know what your thoughts are about this episode. And if you haven't been able to catch up, please do catch up on part 1 and part 2, and then come to part 3. Stay tuned for more uploads, and let's get real and raw right here on the Raw Pod with me, Renee Were.